The dawn broke pale and mean over the smouldering husk of the Dunn homestead. What hadn't been torched was blackened with soot. The roof collapsed inward like a broken rib cage. Smoke still curled from the ash heap where the barn used to be. Snow clung in patches to the dry grass, steaming where fire had kissed the ground. Sheriff Nate Callahan reined in his bay gelding beside the charred remains of the main cabin. The posse flanked him, 3 local men, rifles slung and eyes hard. Their boots crunched over frostbitten mud as they dismounted. "Clara Dunn!" Nate called out, voice hoarse from the cold and suspicion. "You best come out now." Nothing moved but a hawk overhead, circling slow above the ruins. Then a cough, wet and rough, from behind what had been the hearthstone. Clara emerged, wrapped in a soot-stained shawl, her face smeared and hollow-eyed. Her blonde hair was scorched at the ends, hanging in tangled strings. She clutched a broken tin cup in one hand. Blood crusted at her temple. "You looking to hang me, Nate?" she rasped, no fear in her voice. "You're coming to town for trial," the sheriff replied. "We got testimony says you opened your doors to Comanche raiders, that you stood by while your husband got a tomahawk to the throat." Clara's eyes flicked past him to the men behind. Jed Hammond, who'd once danced with her at the spring social, now holding a length of rope like it meant comfort. Elijah Bowers, whose boy was killed last fall near the canyon, staring like he was carving her face into memory. "I didn't open nothin'," Clara said. "They took him, and they left me." "Convenient," Jed muttered. Sheriff Callahan dismounted and stepped closer, eyeing the wreckage. He crouched near the blackened timber. "No horses left, no supplies, just you." He looked up at her. "That's hard for a jury to believe, Clara." "I didn't ask for a jury," she whispered. The sheriff sighed, pulled a pair of iron manacles from his coat. "Didn't ask for a fire either, I suppose, but it came." He bound her wrists. Clara didn't resist. They tied her to the back of Jed's mule and began the slow, cold ride toward Broken Ridge, 16 miles through scrub, gulch, and wind. Tahoma watched from a distant hill, still as the twisted mesquite beside him. His bow lay across his lap. He had seen the smoke at dusk, the wagon by dawn. He knew the woman. Not by name, but by face and act. 3 winters ago she had hidden him in her barn, fed him, stitched the arrow wound in his thigh, and said nothing when soldiers passed. She hadn't flinched at his paint or his silence. She hadn't asked for thanks. Now she was chained like a thief. Tahoma's eyes narrowed. He understood white law. It was made of mouths, not truth. But he also knew the sound of an unjust silence. His hand brushed the smooth wood of his bow. Before sunrise tomorrow he would raise it. The ride was silent but for the wind and mule hooves. Clara's head lolled, her cheek split open where Jed's rifle stock had struck her earlier. None offered water. Sheriff Callahan didn't speak unless he had to. By midday the snow deepened, and the trail narrowed through the bone-dry riverbed. That's where the first arrow landed, in the dirt, upright, humming with warning. Jed cursed and pulled his rifle. Elijah scanned the ridges. "Comanche," he hissed. "They're following." "No," Clara murmured. "Just one." Sheriff Callahan turned. "What?" Clara looked up at him, blood drying across her face, her voice steady. "He's not here for you." The arrow stood like a spine in the earth, vibrating faintly in the cold air. Jed leveled his rifle toward the hills, eyes darting between the scraggly brush and distant ledges. Elijah dropped to a knee behind a fallen cottonwood trunk. "Where there's one, there's 10. That's how they move." Sheriff Callahan said nothing, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. He studied Clara instead. She was calm, too calm for someone who might be scalped if the Comanche charged. Clara met his gaze. "It's not a war party. You certain of that?" "I know him." Nate frowned, his jaw working. "Know him? I helped him once. He owes me." Jed spat. "A Comanche don't owe nothing but death." Clara didn't answer. Her wrists were bleeding where the iron bit into them. Her lips were cracked, bloodied from cold and fists, but her voice stayed steady. "Unchain me." Sheriff Callahan took a long look at the arrow. It wasn't war paint. The shaft was white oak, tied with a strip of tanned deerskin, marked with 3 charcoal lines. Not a threat, a signal. He drew his knife and cut the rope binding Clara to the mule. Her hands stayed shackled, but he let her walk beside him now, not behind. They moved on. That night, they camped beneath a line of boulders near Devil's Pass. The fire was small, the food scarce. Clara chewed jerky slowly, staring into the flames like they whispered something no one else could hear. Jed paced, muttering. Elijah watched the dark, his fingers twitching near the trigger. Sheriff Callahan finally spoke. "Tell me what happened, Clara." She didn't look at him, just stirred the coals with a stick. "My husband hated Injuns. Any kind. Called 'em all devils." "We know that," Elijah said. "He led the raid last spring." Clara nodded slowly. "That raid killed Tahoma's father. My husband came home drunk, bragging. Called it justice." Jed growled. "What's this got to do with the fire?" Clara turned to face him, voice like winter wind. "Tahoma came. He was alone, hurt. I gave him food, stitched him up. You should have told the sheriff. I did what was right." The silence that followed stretched long. Then Clara's voice broke, low and ragged. "3 nights ago they came. My husband had gone to trade in Abilene. I thought he was gone another day, but he came home early. Saw Tahoma near the barn." She didn't finish. "Your husband raised a rifle," Callahan guessed. Clara nodded. "He died," she whispered, "and Tahoma burned the place. He said it had to look like a raid. For my sake." Elijah shook his head. "Why the hell would he protect you?" "Because I gave him mercy, once." Jed stood abruptly, kicking dust at the fire. "And now we're following a Comanche trail and letting his whore tell us how to read arrows." Sheriff Callahan stood too, slowly. "Sit down, Jed. I ain't taking orders from a man listening to a traitor." "Jed." The sheriff's voice was iron now. Jed held the sheriff's gaze for a long breath, then sat, muttered something low and hateful under his breath. From the cliff above, unseen by all, Tahoma watched the sparks rise. He hadn't known Clara's husband returned early. He hadn't known Clara was struck afterward, bound like a criminal. But now he did, and he would not let her hang. Not for a lie wrapped in white man's law. At midnight, Clara opened her eyes. The fire was ash. The others snored softly. Sheriff Callahan sat upright, his back to the rocks, a shotgun across his knees. A shape moved beyond the fire ring, silent, graceful. Clara didn't flinch. She whispered, "I knew you'd come." Tahoma stepped forward, face painted in ash, bow in hand. He said nothing. He handed her a wrapped bundle, dried meat, flint, and a small blade. Clara looked at him. "They won't believe me." Tahoma nodded. "Then I will make them believe." She hesitated. "Don't kill them. Please." Tahoma's eyes were unreadable. "They have not yet chosen," he said. "But soon they must." He vanished into the dark as silently as he came. When morning came, the trail ahead was marked by 2 new arrows, this time in the shape of a cross, a warning or a promise. They broke camp in tense silence. The arrows left overnight were still there, planted in the frost like grave markers. Jed refused to go forward without his rifle in hand, glancing over his shoulder every few minutes. Elijah said nothing, but his jaw was tight, his knuckles pale where they gripped the reins. Clara walked beside Sheriff Callahan now. The chain still bit her wrists, but he hadn't retied her to the mule. Her face had the look of someone who'd passed through fire and didn't care much what came next. They rode through the canyon pass, where the sun cast long bars of shadow down the rock walls. The wind howled low and steady. Tahoma wasn't visible, but his presence pressed against them like the smell of coming rain. About midday they reached Cinder Bluff, a dry, cracked ridge where wagon ruts from the Oregon Trail still scarred the earth. That's where they saw the bodies. 2 men, white, face down in the dust. Traders, maybe. Shot clean through, their horses gone, their boots too. Elijah muttered a prayer. Jed spat. "This is what comes of trusting redskins." Clara stepped forward. "These men were stripped, not scalped. This wasn't Comanche." Sheriff Callahan crouched beside the bodies. "Bullet wounds, close range, no arrows." "Outlaws," Elijah said. "Not warriors." "They wanted the horses," Clara added, "and left the bodies to rot." Jed snorted. "Y'all always got an explanation when it ain't convenient." Clara didn't answer. She looked past them to the hills. Somewhere out there, Tahoma was watching. She knew it. They buried the bodies quickly and moved on. The trail narrowed, and the silence stretched tight. They were a day out from Broken Ridge, and Clara could feel the noose tightening already. Not the rope itself, but the slow pull of public judgment. Rumor traveled faster than horses, and she knew what waited in town. Whispers, hate, and maybe a gallows. That night they camped in a dry wash, ringed by sandstone. Coyotes yipped in the distance. Jed stayed awake, rifle across his lap. Elijah dozed, restless. Sheriff Callahan asked no questions. Clara finally broke the silence. "You ever kill a man you didn't want to?" she asked him. The sheriff didn't look at her. "No such thing as wanting it. I mean someone you knew deserved it, but it still haunts you." Callahan took a long breath. "Yeah, once." Clara nodded. Then you know how I feel." He didn't reply. Around midnight, a stone clattered down from the bluff above. Jed snapped awake, gun raised. Tahoma stepped into view, this time not alone. Beside him stood a white man, hands tied, a gag in his mouth. His coat bore the mark of the Dunn cattle brand. His eyes burned with hate. Jed stood, weapon aimed. "What the hell?" Tahoma raised his hand. Sheriff Callahan stood slowly. "What is this?" Clara stepped forward, heart slamming. "I know him," she whispered. "That's Ward Finch, my husband's hired hand." The sheriff looked at her. "You know why he's here?" Clara swallowed hard. "He was there that night. He helped my husband. He was the one who set the fire after he beat me half to death." Tahoma spoke finely, his English slow but firm. He told the story in the canyon, to others. Said the woman begged the Comanche to take her husband's life, said she was the reason for the blood. The sheriff walked up to Finch, pulled the gag down. "You sayin' this man lied to make her hang?" Finch spat at Clara. "She deserved worse. Sleeping with that savage while her husband rotted." Jed cocked his rifle, but it was Elijah who moved first, ripped the rifle from Finch's back and cracked him across the jaw. Callahan caught his breath. "You know what you just admitted to?" the sheriff asked Finch. "Don't matter. Ain't no white jury gonna take a redskin's word." Clara looked at the sheriff. "You're the law, Nate. You tell me if the truth matters." Callahan stared at Finch for a long moment, then turned to Tahoma. "You'll testify?" Tahoma nodded once. The sheriff turned to Clara. "Then we're going to Broken Ridge. All of us." Jed stepped back. "You mean to put this Comanche on the stand?" "If he's the only one telling the truth, then yeah, I'll risk it." Jed didn't argue, but the look in his eyes said he wasn't done. Not by a long shot. At dawn they broke camp, and for the first time, Clara Dunn wasn't walking behind the mule. She was walking free, her wrists still bound but her head held high. They were one day from town, and every mile closer, the truth became harder to bury. They reached Broken Ridge by midday. The sun burned hot despite the snow in the gullies, and wind carried dust through the narrow streets. Folks paused in their business to watch the group ride in, Clara with chains on her wrists, Tahoma walking beside her, and Ward Finch tied like a hog across Elijah's spare horse. The sight stirred a storm. Old men leaned on porch posts, eyes narrowing. Women clutched their children. A dog barked and wouldn't stop. Whispers spread like spilled liquor. "That her? She brought the Comanche with her? God almighty." Sheriff Callahan dismounted at the jailhouse and nodded for Clara to follow. She did, slow but proud. The moment she stepped down, someone hurled a rock. It struck the ground near her boots, hard enough to chip. Tahoma's hand brushed the bow on his back. Callahan raised both palms. "No trouble. Not here." He escorted Clara inside, locked Finch in the adjacent cell, and motioned for Tahoma to remain outside. The Comanche hunter didn't protest. He simply stood still as stone, scanning the faces gathering in the street. Inside, the jail smelled of wood smoke and rust. Clara sat in the corner, shackles still on. Finch spat blood from his cracked lip and grinned at her through the bars. "You really think that red dog's gonna save you?" Clara said nothing. Sheriff Callahan entered the records room, rolled his sleeves, and poured a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt rope. His deputy, young Will Mercer, burst through the door moments later. "Town's lit up, Sheriff. They heard about the trial." "Course they did. They're saying if you let a Comanche testify, they'll torch the place themselves." "Let 'em try," Callahan muttered. "We got truth to deal with." By late afternoon, word had spread. Mayor Gilbert arrived, his face red from drink or rage. "You've lost your damn mind, Nate," the mayor growled. "You think these people'll stand still while a savage testifies against one of their own? Finch ain't one of their own. He's a liar and a coward. He's white, and Clara's not." The mayor glared at him. "You want a riot? I want a trial." In the holding cell, Clara watched the sun fall behind the ridge. The light through the bars turned red, like everything had bled out. Tahoma still hadn't moved. Night fell fast. A crowd gathered near the jail, torches flickering, voices loud and drunk. Someone shouted, "Hang her now!" Another, "Kill the Indian first." Sheriff Callahan stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand. "This jail's got room for more if you're looking to join the prisoners." A bottle shattered against the wall. Inside, Clara whispered through the bars to Tahoma, who stood just outside the window. "You should go." "No, they'll kill you." "They might." "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her, his voice low and certain. "Because you didn't turn away, not when I needed you. Now you need me." She looked down at her hands. "You're risking your life for a woman who let her husband burn." Tahoma shook his head slowly. You didn't let him. You survived him. A gunshot cracked in the distance. Then another. Sheriff Callahan barked orders to the deputy. The jail doors were barred. By midnight, the mob grew to nearly 40 strong. Someone set fire to the post office. Flames licked the eaves, smoke curling toward the sky. Inside, Clara stood. Sheriff Callahan handed her a key. You've got one chance. Out the back. If you run now, no one will blame you. Clara looked at him. I'm not running. He nodded. Didn't think so. Tahoma entered through the rear door. He had slipped past the mob like mist. He placed something on the table, a small pouch. Inside were 5 silver buttons. Clara's husband's coat, found buried near the barn. Evidence, he said. Sheriff Callahan stared at the pouch, then at Clara. This enough to hang Finch? It's enough to start the fire, she whispered. Outside, a chant began. Bring her out! Bring her out! Callahan cocked his shotgun. Tahoma raised his bow, and Clara Dunn walked to the barred door and shouted through the smoke. I didn't kill my husband, but I wish I had. Silence fell. I didn't bring Comanche to my land, but one of them brought justice to it. A torch hit the roof, and the reckoning began. The roof caught fast. Dry shingles, old pitch, and a prairie wind. Within minutes the rafters groaned under heat, and smoke filled the jailhouse. Flames licked at the ceiling beams, casting long, writhing shadows across the floor. Sheriff Callahan tossed the keys to Deputy Mercer. Get Finch to the cellar. Use the iron door. But now! Mercer hauled Finch from the cell by the collar. The prisoner screamed and twisted like a gut-shot hog, but no one listened. The deputy vanished down the stairs beneath the holding room. Tahoma unlatched the back door and stepped into the alley, bow ready. He disappeared into the dark without a word. Clara turned to the sheriff. Her chains were off now, hands scraped and raw but free. Where do I stand? She asked. Where you always did, between what's right and what they think is. They stepped through the front door together. The mob had fanned out across Main Street. Most were drunk, some were armed, a few held torches. When Clara emerged, the roar surged. To the tree! Someone shouted. Shoot the engine! But the engine was already moving. From atop the mill house, Tahoma loosed an arrow that struck the torch from the mob's leader's hand. Sparks exploded on the ground. Another man raised a rifle. He fell with an arrow in his thigh before the shot was fired. The crowd broke like a wave against stone. Some fled, some fell, and some stood frozen. Tahoma dropped from the rooftop, landed light, and walked through the smoke with bow lowered. Only one man remained in his path, Jed Hammond. He raised his rifle, shouted, You brought this filth on us! Clara stepped in front of Tahoma. Shoot me then! Jed's eyes twitched. You burned that farm. You slept with him. I survived a man who beat me, and I stood by one who saved me. Jed didn't shoot. The rifle lowered. Just enough. Then Tahoma stepped past Clara. He pulled something from his pouch, a folded letter, burnt on the edges. He handed it to Sheriff Callahan. It was addressed to Ward Finch, from her husband. It said, Burn the place if I don't return. Make it look like an Injun raid. She ain't worth the land she walks on. Callahan read it aloud. The crowd fell to a hush. Jed turned and walked away. No cheers, no apologies. Just silence. By sunrise, the town had returned to uneasy order. The jailhouse was a blackened husk. Finch was locked in the church cellar, guarded by the sheriff himself. Tahoma vanished into the timber before light hit the ridge. Clara stood alone at the edge of town, watching the sun rise over scorched rooftops and cold ashes. Sheriff Callahan came up beside her. You'll be safe now. No one's safe out here. Not really. You gonna stay? She looked west, toward the horizon. There's a place near the Brazos. Good soil. I can build again. He nodded. You ever see him again? The sheriff said, not finishing. She smiled faintly. I'll thank him. Not for saving me, but for reminding me I was worth saving. She left that morning. No escort, no chains, just the memory of fire, the scent of smoke, and the trace of boot prints beside moccasin tracks in the dust. Behind her, Broken Ridge whispered rumors. But ahead, the trail was clean.